Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, Dee.
Good morning, Carol. It seems forever since I've talked to you.
Well, it has been a while, but we do manage to get an episode out every week, whether we actually talk every week or not.
Yes, everybody, listeners, behind the scenes moment. We sometimes have to record 2 seasons in 1 week because we are so busy because of the holiday season.
It is the holiday season.
And talking about holidays makes me think of birds.
Birds. I think listening to our podcast with our little bird opening makes people think about birds. So let's talk about birds today.
I see you have a quote for us, which I love.
Thank you. I cross-stitched this on something for my mom, and it's not hanging in my house, so I wonder if it's still at my sister's house. I'll have to ask her, but here it is. I heard a bird sing in the dark of December, a magical thing and sweet to remember. We are nearer to spring than we were in September. I heard a bird sing in the dark of December, by Oliver Herford.
I don't know who Oliver Herford is, but I love that quote. And every time I read it, it gives me a lot of hope, because this time of year in some parts of the United States, it's snowy. Not snowy in Oklahoma yet, but it's brown. And brown is hard in Oklahoma. Having a brown landscape for the entire winter is hard. But today, we got a little bit of sunshine peeking through those clouds.
Yeah, we had a completely rained out day yesterday, but the weekend had some nice moments. My neighbor was out working in his yard, and I felt bad that I wasn't working in mine, but what you going to do? Can't be out there every minute.
I often don't work in mine in the winter, which causes me problems. And I'm trying to do a little better this year and cut back some things now, not everything. So people who love birds, don't get on to me, because I know that they have to eat insects. And I know the insects are in the dead stalks of all of our perennials, or a bunch of our perennials. But I have to cut a few back, or I get behind in the spring and kill myself. And I'm getting to the point where I just don't want to kill myself every spring.
Right. But we do, just as much as we welcome butterflies and bees, we love to have birds in the garden. So let's talk about that.
I'm excited to talk about birds. They're welcome in a garden, and they're welcome for many reasons. We love their bird song, but we also love that they eat insects.
Lots and lots of insects.
And especially if you grow native plants, especially oak trees, if you have oak trees around, there are a lot of insects on our native oak trees. And I know this because I went to see Doug Tallamy speak at a Native Plant Society deal. And that was one of the things that really stuck with me, because I am surrounded by oak trees, which means there's a lot of leaves on the ground. But the good thing is that native oak trees attract many different insects, but you don't even see them eating the tree. Whereas it might decimate some other tree. Oak trees evolved at the same time as the insects, so it's just kind of a cool thing.
That is cool. Now, do you feed the birds at your house?
You mean in the winter?
Yes.
You mean from a feeder? Yeah, actually, Bill and I do, and I know there's some controversy about that, because some people think it gets them off their migratory path, but we don't start feeding them until pretty much everything out there is just dead. And then we put out the feeders, and we mostly get the winter birds, like cardinals, chickadees, things like that.
That's what I do. I put out the feeders towards the middle of the end of October. I'll start setting them up, and I get blue jays, cardinals, finches.
We get those.
Probably other birds that I don't really recognize, because I'm not very good at identifying birds.
We're not birders, we're gardeners, and sometimes you are a birder and a gardener, which makes you have a great skill set. I know just enough to get myself in trouble on identification. Like, one of the birds that I'm especially fond of is, I think, called a black cap sparrow. It has a little black hat, but I may be confusing that with some other bird. And if so, the listeners can come in and tell me, because, I appreciate it.
Well, feeding birds is a big business. I looked it up, and people spend $5 billion with a B dollars on bird feed and supplies every year.
Wow.
That's about a tenth of what they spend on gardening, but still quite a bit of change.
That's huge. And people love seeing the birds come to their feeders. And of course, if you want cardinals, all you need to do is put in some black sunflower seed and you will have more cardinals than you know what to do with.
Really, because I use, I'll have to think what I use, but I don't have the black oil. It's just in the mix that I buy. I go to the Wild Birds Unlimited store.
I love Wild Birds Unlimited. They're a franchise, and we have one of the franchisees in Oklahoma City, and I think we have one in Tulsa too. One thing I was going to say is that we mix our seed, our mix, and then we have black oil sunflower seed, and so Bill just fills it in the feeder half and half. So half of it's the black oil and half of it's the other one, which has black oil sunflower seed in it too. Don't you also feed something peanuts?
I feed the Blue Jays peanuts. I put out one special peanut feeder. I fill it once a day because literally they could eat it out every hour, and you could spend a lot of money. But it's fun. They kind of dive in, they grab a peanut, and they run off. And then in the spring, sometimes I find peanut seedlings in my yard.
Cool. I've never seen a peanut seedling.
Oh, it looks like it looks like an oversized clover with the 3 leaves.
Oh, of course it does. That makes sense.
I also, for my cardinals, I put out safflower seed. They love that. It's all white. It's the all white seed.
Yeah, and they do love that. It kind of looks like a sunflower seed, sort of, I think, but a little different. Yeah, all those things are good. But we also were going to talk about things you can grow that will feed your birds too.
So that's our flower segment. We're going to talk about planting for the birds so that when they come to your yard, they not only find shelter, which is important, but they find something to eat. And so the first flower that always comes to mind is coneflowers.
Yeah, because the finches love to sit on top of those coneflowers in the winter and eat those little seeds. And that's how you end up with baby coneflowers all over your garden, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky, they do eat quite a few of those. And so that is, I think, an ugly flower to leave standing, but I leave some of them standing because the finches like it. And it's kind of fun to watch them on there.
So I have a question for you. Do you get finches in the summer when they're all colored up, or are you like Oklahoma and we get them in the winter and just about the time the males color, they fly off?
Nope. We get the yellow ones in the summertime too.
I never ever get to see one. Last year I watched them, and I want to say it was February or March, and the boys were just starting to get their pretty plumage, and I thought, well, goodbye finches until next year. And one finch that I really love that isn't an American goldfinch, which is what we're talking about, there are other finches. I love the house finch. So cute.
And so this is where I don't know one finch from another, but I do know we get the yellow colored up ones in the summertime. How's that?
That works.
I'm really not very well versed on birds.
Well, if you look at a house finch, you'll see that you get them all the time. They're kind of I think sometimes they're called a purple house finch, but they aren't really purple. They have kind of a pink and red breast and on their head, and then the back part is brown, and they look like a finch. They're a little tiny bird, but they're super awesome. And when you feed the birds, you know what else you attract, don't you? At least out here.
Cats?
Well, yeah. If you have, you could attract cats. I was actually thinking about hawks. The red-shouldered hawk loves to watch the birds at the feeders, and you can always tell when the birds are at the feeder and the hawk is around because all of a sudden the birds go away. He or she rarely gets one, but once in a while they do.
Well, I have hawks too. I have what I call a Cooper's hawk, they tell me. Yeah, I saw one on the sidewalk last winter when I was out shoveling some snow, and it was staring at me and I was staring at it. And I thought, what are you going to do? And then it took off and it had a little baby bird in his claws. It's going to eat a bird.
Yeah, it happens. It's the circle of life, Carol. It's the circle of life. So some other flowers that are great for birds are sunflowers. I'd love to grow those giant sunflowers
flower hangs down and then the birds hang upside down trying to get to all that seed. I love that.
It's so cool to watch. And one day I'll be out there and it's just full of seed. And then the next day the seeds are all gone. And I go, wow, we had a influx of birds. Milkweed, which I didn't know milkweed was actually a bird that was popular with birds.
Yeah, I didn't either, but it makes sense that they would use the fiber of the milkweed seeds to spin into their nests.
Sure.
And I'm assuming they get a little bit of nutrition from the seed.
That's cool. I assume so. There's not very many seeds and all that fuzz, but
no.
I imagine they love the fiber, the silkiness of it. So we already talked about oak trees.
Yep.
And how great they are, but you can also grow service berries, which is another native tree. Isn't it aronia?
Aronia is chokecherry.
See? It's a good thing I have Carol here to help me. Okay, well, anyway, we'll just say service berries unless you can remember what what the botanical name is.
Amelanchier.
Good job, Amelanchier. Of course it is. Okay, crab apples are another one. Let me tell you about my crab apples. So I have these Royal Raindrops crab apples. I'll put a picture up on our various social media. I love my Royal Raindrops crab apples but they're a new fashioned crab apple because they have what's called persistent fruit. I love these terms that hybridizers use. Persistent fruit means that you don't end up with little bitty crab apples all over your yard. And so you don't have chunks of crab apple, right? Like old fashioned trees. You also can't make jelly out of them like you can crab apple jelly on an old fashioned tree. But mine, they hang in these little clusters, and right now they're still hanging there. And when I go on my walk around the property, I walk by them and but here's the thing, the birds don't like the fruit on that tree as much as they do the old fashioned tree.
Yeah, they bred a tree for something and they took out the flavor, I guess.
Maybe. I don't know.
The other thing, though, I have a crab apple. It's called Guinevere, and it is a great 4 seasons tree.
Yes.
It's got great spring flowers. It's got clear foliage all summer. It doesn't get any diseases. It's got great fall color.
Mine doesn't either.
It rarely seems to fruit. And so I can look outside right now at it. I'm going to look at it. Hang on. No fruit. And it rarely does. Every once in a while. But it's by my bird feeder, so the birds kind of hang out in there.
So it gives them cover, which is another thing that you need for birds. They need to have places to go fly to after they go to a bird feeder or are in your garden, someplace where they can eat their meal and digest it. They also need a place to raise their young. They also need water. Those are some of the things that we make sure we have in our gardens so that the birds are happy. Eventually, the birds do eat the fruit off my Royal Raindrops, but it has to be in late winter. So I wonder if the fruit isn't super tart and then, it mellows as it freezes and thaws over and over again.
That could be. I have an aronia in my garden, and the chokecherry, they don't hardly eat those berries at all. The few berries that it has. They're sour.
Yeah, they are. Aronias, chokecherries, are a native tree to North America too. More like, I consider them kind of a shrub. Mine aren't that big. Are yours big?
No, this thing, I should yank it out for poor behavior on the part of a shrub because it hasn't really gotten very big. And I need it to be bigger and nicer, or it's going to have to make way for something else.
So I have one chokecherry, and I don't remember which variety. It may just be the native straight species. And it is one stick, and it's been one stick for about 10 years. It doesn't cause me any problems, so I haven't pulled it out yet. But I'm like, when are you going to grow before I die? And then I have another one, and for the life of me, I can't remember which variety it is, but I bought it as a big shrub. And so I'm showing Carol with my hands, because we can see each other, people. I'm holding my hands out about 4 feet, and it's about that wide, and it's probably about 4 feet tall. So maybe if you bought a big one, a big mature one.
Well, I thought I bought a fairly big one, and mine has about 3 stems on it. I mean, I don't know. You and I, neither one are this is not an endorsement of chokecherry, nor is it saying don't plant it. It's just saying in our gardens, it's doing nothing.
Yeah, mine's not. Yeah, mine's not doing anything. People do make jam from choke cherries.
Yeah, probably our friend Ellen Zakos makes jam from choke cherries, but I think you have to have a ton of sugar to make those babies sweeten up. Not that I've tasted one.
I bet they have a lot of pectin in them too, because of the type of thing it
Probably.
is. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I like my one choke cherry. I'm not as fond of my other one. It's okay. And it's pretty and it has pretty foliage. I forgot to say that on my Royal Raindrops crab apples, they have burgundy foliage all summer. So that's it's definitely a 4-season tree.
Our gardens are by having a garden, you kind of created a space where birds are going to arrive. So just have shelter for them. You need a water source for them. You can feed them, or you can plant shrubs and trees that have places that they can eat from.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to talk now about the vegetable garden and how we're going to tie the vegetable garden into birds.
Yeah, exactly. So do you want to do the quote?
Sure. You've seen Mary Poppins, I'm assuming.
I have seen all the Mary Poppinses. I have 4 kids. Of course I have.
So remember the song Feed the Birds?
I'll never forget that song. It makes me cry.
Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence, tuppence, tuppence a bag. Though her words are simple and few, listen, listen, she's calling to you. Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence, tuppence, tuppence a bag. We think people should go find a YouTube and get all sad listening to that. Or not.
Yeah, especially this time of year, because, it's a mixture of joy and melancholy. Yay. So we talked before we got on here what a tuppence is. It means 2 pence. And so we discussed what a pence is. And I told you how I do English money, which is going to make our few English listeners laugh. I just translate English money to dollars and pennies because it's a lot easier, and quarters and nickels, because I just don't have time to try to figure it all in my head. So I don't worry about the exchange rate. And we actually looked it up. And right now the British pound is 1.24 to the dollar, whatever that means. It means that they're stronger than we are. So, but we're talking about a quarter. So I just say a pound is $1, a pence is a penny. And then in between, they have money that is about the same size as our money. And I just tell myself that's a quarter and that's a nickel. And a 5-pound note is $5. And I know that's that's probably ridiculous, but it works for me. And it actually helped someone on our last tour because she was totally flipping out about all the money, because all their money is kind of the same size and has different pictures on it, or I don't know. I just said, look, if it's a 5, pretend it's $5. And then after that, she calmed down. So see, it worked.
That's good.
That's Dee's travel tip.
We're going to talk about veggies for birds and some things you can grow in your vegetable garden to help the birds out. And the one I like to grow is broomcorn.
I have never, ever grown broomcorn, ever.
I have. It's very fun. It is actually a sorghum. It's
that makes
sorghum
sense.
vulgare. And, it has really stiff, I guess they're the stems that the seeds end up on. I don't know if there's some botanical word for that. But they actually make brooms out of it. Once the seed is, they remove the seed, and then those stems become
bristles. Those bristles become the broom.
Bristles. That's the word I was looking for. So I've actually harvested and then I've kept those bristles thinking, oh, I'm going to make a broom, but I haven't made any brooms yet.
I mean, who has the time? If you have a garden, I don't think you're a broom maker. Not usually.
No.
You're a little busy.
No. But the fun part of it is this plant grows 10 to 12 feet tall, and the seed is up on the top on the bristles. And so the birds get up there to eat the seed, and they kind of sway with the wind and flutter around. And it's really kind of fun.
I bet that's pretty. The one I like to grow often is amaranth, and I like the red varieties. And the birds like the red varieties too, although they would eat any amaranth. Let's be honest. They eat millet, amaranth. That's what's in bird feed. A lot of bird feed is a lot of millet and occasionally amaranth. So the red varieties are beautiful. They look great in arrangements if you don't leave them for the birds. They're pretty in your garden, and I grow them in my cut flower garden, which is next to my vegetable garden.
Do you have problems or issues with self-sowing of the amaranth that it comes up all over?
I do not. I know people talk about that, and obviously all of this stuff has seed, and so it's going to spill because that's what the birds are eating, and that's why we're feeding the birds through the garden. But I just don't have a lot of trouble with it. I think they eat it all, and I don't think they poop out amaranth seeds at my house. Do you?
I don't grow amaranth, so I don't really know if that's going to be a problem or not, but I probably will try to grow some this next year.
You should. You should grow some. It's really pretty. And I know that Floret Flowers has some really pretty amaranth, but so does Baker Creek. There's a bunch of companies that have good amaranth. I'm sure Botanical Interest does.
Yeah, we'll find some links to amaranth, and I know Botanical Interest has the broom corn because that's where I buy my seed. So it's fun.
And we love Botanical Interests. So you guys should buy seeds from them because they did a giveaway with us this year.
Right. And you know what I don't like about birds in the garden?
What do you not like?
Sometimes, no, I don't care. They peck out the corn seedlings when they first start coming up. They peck them out sometimes. You don't have that problem.
Of course they do. You remember my meadow that I sowed in October? Remember that?
Yes.
The meadow in the upper pasture for the birds and the bees next year. Well, crows were in that meadow trying to eat all the seed before it actually, because you have to put that right on top of the soil. And so the birds were out there and my husband was all mad and, throwing a fit about it. And I was like, we put out so much seed, dude, that we're going to have the meadow. And I was going to tell you that when I walked up there last week, I noticed that little seedlings of some of the perennials have come up.
Well, that's good. And for our listeners, the old saying is if you sow grass seed in the spring, you're sowing it for the birds. If you sow it in the fall, then it has a chance to germinate. I don't know why they say that, but they do.
I don't either, because I think the birds eat all year. I don't think they just eat in the spring.
No.
But some of those seeds, some of those grass seed companies put stuff on it that makes it not attractive to the birds too. They put coatings and stuff on it. And then there's also, I was going to think, I know what else I don't like about birds in the garden. You want to know?
Sure.
They peck your red tomatoes.
Yeah, I have had that where, you go and the tomato looks delicious and then you pick it and it's got big pecks in it.
And so I saw on some show about a garden. It was like a community garden that was down in, I want to say, Austin. And it's so bad. The birds are so bad about pecking red tomatoes that in that garden, they only grow yellow and green varieties because there are some green, like green zebras one. And they grow those because the birds are not attracted to those. They're more attracted to the red ones.
Huh. Interesting. So do you put up a scarecrow?
Interesting.
Do you put up a scarecrow to try to keep them away?
In my upper pasture or in my vegetable garden?
Either one.
I really don't, because I don't have too much trouble out here. I think the birds have a lot to eat. And so occasionally they'll peck a tomato, but usually I have so many tomatoes that I just share a tomato with them. And my crows, crows are super smart. And I actually wrote a whole article on crows one time. And I love crows. I know that's not popular, but I love them. And my crows are multi-generational and have lived here with me for 30 years. And they know me. And the reason I know they know me is because they talk about me when I come outside. And there's certain noises that crows make. And if you're interested in that at all, there's there's some good videos about, I think it's University of Washington, that I guess this could be sort of part of our dirt, although we have a bunch of books for our dirt. But the University of Washington did a whole series of, I was going to say tests, but I would say experiments where they had to wear masks because they were catching the crows and banding them. Well, the crows knew who the students were, so they started to attack them. So they started to wear presidential masks, which makes me kind of laugh. And the crows are super smart. And so I know that my crows know me. There's also a great video out there of a kid who had a friendship with a crow, and the crow would bring him shiny stuff, and he would leave things for the crow.
I've seen those. And so we do have an interesting relationship with birds, and we ought to talk about that as our dirt. But because people have been bad for birds. The passenger pigeon is extinct in North America, and the last one died
because of us,
like 1914 or sometime around there. The last one died in a zoo in Cincinnati, but we literally killed off 3 to 5 billion with a B passenger pigeons in the United States in the 1800s.
That's shocking. Were we eating them? Why did we do that?
I think they were eating them, and then they were killing them to get the feathers to make hats for women and things like that. But there's a whole...
Carol.
I know. I'm depressing you there.
You brought me down again. I had this great story about crows and how intelligent they are and how fun they are, and now we're sad again.
Well, you can go to passengerpigeon.org, and we'll put a link to that and read more about how we just exploited the passenger pigeon and killed them off.
Because they were super tame.
I guess.
Luckily for crows, they aren't that tame. So, But yeah, I give my crows tomatoes. But I don't care.
We get fascinated. And there's a couple of books that we're going to talk about that really, I think, are more about fascination with birds than anything. And the first one that I read earlier this year is called The Feather Thief, Beauty, Obsession, and the Natural History Heist of the Century by Kirk Wallace Johnson. This is a true story, about these guys who they tie the flies for fly fishing. And
yes, which take feathers.
And these guys were obsessed with making the flies like they made in the 19th century and the early 20th century. Well, some of those birds, you can't find those feathers. And so it is about somebody stole these birds from the Natural History Museum in England. Hundreds of them.
Wow.
And then
so were they they sold these flies, right? So did they tell people they were antique flies?
Yeah, they would say, well, I found this. I bought a hat at an antique store and it had this rare bird plumage on it. But they said, and it was 2 young men. They were selling these feathers on eBay and nobody was saying anything. But it's a fascinating book.
Because they're all obsessed with fly fishing.
Don't ask too many questions, but read the book. It's very, very good. History, natural history, all about birds and obsession, and it's really good.
Cool. So, and then I had one called Gift of the Red Bird, which is by Paula Darcy, which is about this woman's relationship with a cardinal in her garden. And I think you guys should read it. It's a very small book. It would make a great Christmas gift. And who doesn't love cardinals? And a small aside about cardinals. People who live west of the Rocky Mountains do not have them. Yes, people, they do not have them. We have a very good friend in California, and she loves pictures of cardinals, and we send them to her because she loves cardinals so much, and she has never, I think she's seen one because she's traveled, but you have to travel in winter to really see them. And she doesn't have them in her garden. And here, they're like the most common bird next to sparrows and blue jays.
Yeah, we have a lot of cardinals here. They're so beautiful, especially when you have snow on the ground. And that red plumage just really stands out. I love those cardinals.
I do too. And the funny part about cardinals is in the winter, because all their hormones are down, the boys all just hang out on my arbor and wait their turn to get bird food. And because we have this arbor that has a wisteria on top, and I'm looking outside right now and I can see, I see a female cardinal in there right now. The cardinals love that section and they all hang out together. And then as soon as spring comes and they're already bright, but they get brighter, all of a sudden they fight amongst each other and it all ends because spring is here.
That's right. Another book I read this year was called A Sweet Wild Note, What We Hear When the Birds Sing by Richard Smith. And we'll put a link to that as well. But this is all about our obsession with trying to understand bird song, which we don't, and imitate it.
We don't understand it very well.
But it's it goes back to the poets who tried to write about bird song in poetry, and composers who tried to write musical scores that imitated bird song. And it's really kind of a natural history / literature book. I liked it.
Oh, I think I'd like that one too. And then you also chose one called How to Know the Birds by Ted Floyd. He's the editor of Birding Magazine, and it was published by National Geographic.
Yeah.
I guess that's sciencey, isn't it?
Well, it's not really that sciencey, but it's 200 essays, and most of them are maybe like a page and a half. It's tiny print. But it's like a year journey through make yourself know the birds better. And so I started reading that.
Which it sounds like we should both read that one, probably.
Yes, and I just found this. I was down at the local independent bookstore, and I was browsing, and they had gotten a couple of gardening books in. They were very excited for me that they had gotten them in. And then she said, well, we also have these birding books, but I don't know that you're into birds. And I'm like, I garden. Of course I'm into birds. So that's where I found that. Otherwise, I didn't know about it.
Okay, you say you're into birds, but here's the deal. I walk a park, and it's called Mitch Park. It's in Edmond, Oklahoma. And when you're out there in the morning, especially in the spring, because the birds talk a lot in the spring, you'll see all these people out there with binoculars, right? And so the first time I saw them, I was like, hi.
They're like,
hail to thee, to hi. And they were like looking at me in abject horror, because guess what I was doing?
making the birds scatter away.
Exactly, because gardeners chatter to each other all the time, because you look at a flower and you go, ooh, look at this flower. Wow, look at this flower. Look at this look at this tomato, blah, 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 right? Because those don't run or fly away.
So when I say I'm into birding, what I mean is I'm into having birds show up in my garden. How's that?
Right. You don't have to catalog them and stuff, which I'm kind of grateful for. The last book that I thought of just while we were talking was The Blue Jays Dance, which is by Louise Erdrich. And she's a very famous writer. And this one is actually a memoir that she wrote about the writing life, but it also had to do with her marriage and her kids. And it's a wonderful book. And The Blue Jays Dance is her explanation of how blue jays jump down and like chase off hawks. And it just to read that section alone is worth buying the book.
Very good. Well, now I got a few more books to read, and so do you.
I was going to say we gave you a lot to read, but you know what? It's that season of giving. And so you might give one of these to your, significant others in your life and people you care about, especially if they like birds. Who doesn't like birds?
And then you can borrow the book back to read.
Yes. Or like some people did with my gardening book, they bought it for themselves, read it, and then gave it to someone else.
There you go.
Yes, they told me that.
Speaking of the season of giving, as we wrap up here, I want to give a shout out to Becky Basil, or Basil Becky, I should say, for being a faithful listener. I met her in person on Friday at a Garden Com event. She's a lovely person. So hi Basil
awesome.
Becky. And we do want to remind our listeners, if they like what they hear, please share about us to your friends. The more listeners, the better. And people can find us all over the internet.
And we topped, we got a new number of people who listened this week, and it just made our day. So we love that you guys listen. We love that you share with us on all the platforms, the social platforms. So do you want to run down them, or shall I?
Well, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and a little bit on Pinterest. And I will put links in the show notes so they can find us. But basically search for The Garden Angelist.
Right. And if you want to follow us individually, on most places, I'm Red Dirt Ramblings. And on most places, she's Indie Gardener or May Dreams Gardens. So you can find us almost anywhere. And we would love to have you come back every week and chat with us over the garden fence.
All right. And I'll put an email address if people want to email us directly at thegardenangelist@gmail.com. I'll put that on the show notes too. Bye.
Bye. It was great chatting with you. See you later.